Thank you all for coming. Today we are being visited by Pieterjan Prakken from Groningen, whose PhD work, as I understand, focuses on humor and dark play in political discourse. And today you're going to talk to us about how dark play exploits humor to radicalize. Yeah. Before we start, few notes, because there was some confusion in the emails, so you are in the right place. This is the philosophy department colloquium. This presentation will take, this colloquium will take 90 minutes, divided into 45 for presentation and 45 for questions. Is this the same information that you got? When it is time, when it's the presentation time, we shall listen. We shall not speak, we shall not answer emails, we shall not solve Sudoku, we shall listen. And when it is time to ask questions, we shall ask questions. Is that understood?
Yes.
And after this formal part is over, there's a possibility, if any of you would be interested, to go for a couple of drinks in München. I know that Gareth agreed.
You made me clear.
And anybody else who feels like they want to join us can join us. Without further ado.
Well, I want to first thank you so much for the great introduction, and I want to say a few words of how you said grace. Maybe that's a bit too religious, but I'm so thankful to be here, so grateful to be here in Estonia. It's my first time. I'm really loving it here. I saw Tallinn, I saw Tartu, and they also Margaret took me for a lovely lunch, and I also asked if I wanted to be in Estonia to the Susi Metsa. I think you have previously had people who went to the Susi Metsa, right? This beautiful retreat. I went there for 2 weeks in Estonian winter wonderland. That's what I really wanted to as well. To see like the Estonian snow. We may think if you've ever been in the Netherlands, there's not that much snow here in the Netherlands. So I really enjoyed it. I mean, after 2 weeks it's a bit much because you start to see also like more bad things, you have to deal with the snow or the cold. But I'm really thankful to be in Estonia, and I will never forget this amazing place. And hopefully I can return someday, and I would really love that. So thank you very much for letting me talk today. Yeah, my talk is about dark play and humor in far-right politics. I kind of changed the title a bit to more focus on the virtue ethics part. So it is mostly about to be playful or to be serious. That's the question. Quick hint to Shakespeare, so that's a big hint. And it's the ethical challenge to dark play extremism. So first I want to talk a bit about my dissertation. Well, first, I want to keep you all a bit focused and think about the last couple of weeks. I hope you follow Dutch, US politics, Dutch politics. I don't hope you follow any of that. But in the US, Trump is already joking about being a dictator or canceling the midterms for a long time already. And the midterms are a bit more recent, that he makes jokes about that, and they are defended as jokes. But these jokes about running for a third term are already there in 2018 at rallies. At most rallies that I studied, he's joking about, well, maybe we should run for a third term. Let's see how the fake news media responds. Always like as kind of a trigger, of trolling these liberals or what they see as like liberal snowflakes. So it's always kind of in a playful way, right? And if he or like people from the movement from Mara get pressed about it, it's always the same response, like we're just playful. You guys cannot take a joke. But we can also think about other stuff. Think about Greenland. Greenland started out as a joke. And they all often still present it as a joke, as through a meme or whatever, But he clearly started out, he defended his most earliest statements about Greenland as that he was just playing around. This was just joking. He was not really getting invaded. I'm just joking around. Now it becomes a bit more serious right now, right? So this is the kind of topic, the realm where we are living in right now. And it's exactly the realm, the political realm, that I'm going to address today. And it's also the realm that my dissertation addresses. But it also seems more global. If you think about Najib Bukele, that's one example. You can also think about Milei, who comes on stage or campaigns with a chainsaw, for instance. It's also very playful. Bukele calls himself the coolest dictator in the world. Well, he's a dictator, but he also presents this as something fun, you know. So it's interesting how people use humor as something, you know, as a political tool. The same with Elon Musk, that he comes on like dressed as in an outfit of a funny meme at CPAC, or think about internet humor, trolling. So this is the what we're dealing with. This is what I want to address. So first, I want to talk a bit about my dissertation, so you kind of get a deal, you know, what I've been doing, what my work is about, what dark play is, why it is so radical, why it has such a big place in the political discourse, especially in the US. And then I will talk about the second question, the normative question. So how can we cultivate an ethical sense of humor, especially in a political context? So how should we deal with this dark play? Is there like a virtuous response to this, or are we doomed? We will see. So when I talk, it's mostly, that's the most important part. So I will talk a bit about humor ethics, what it is, what the problems are with humor ethics, how maybe to solve them. I think particularly to virtue ethics and the concept of profanis, practical wisdom. And maybe for later is this idea of, is there like a meta virtue of play, or is humor even a virtue? We can reflect on that. It's a bit a new project, so I will really appreciate any help, and I will signpost that later on as well, like say, you know, this is kind of, these are new ideas. Like, funny enough, my dissertation started out to be a bit more normative. So I'm also centered in a philosophy faculty in Groningen, in the Netherlands, when I worked on like the role of dark play, of humor in political discourse, in far-right politics. But I really saw that empirically, nobody really studied humor by Trump. But I really thought, okay, I think it's a very big thing. So people should study empirically also this phenomenon. So most of my dissertation is also studying Trump empirically. So I went to the US. I also went to CPAC. I saw Trump, Elon Musk. I saw this moment as well. I interviewed like former and current far-right or MAGA supporters to really get a sense of what the role is of positive emotions, like humor, in the movement. And this is also the main claim of the movement, or main contribution, that when people talk about populist movements, they always talk in terms of grievance politics. This means like negative emotions. So, oh, people vote for populists or for Trump, oh, because they're angry or they're fearful. They feel the status threat. This is true to some extent. And other literature, not only me, also try to highlight as well, like, well, positive emotions also play a very big role. And there seems to be a kind of bias in anointing positive emotions to liberal or progressive causes. Like, oh, like these progressive causes are having a lot of fun, they use humor. But if they look at the far-right political movements, they kind of miss that. Because humor is also very subjective, right? If you don't find it funny, maybe you don't see it as humor. But for them, it's really humor. They also have fun. That doesn't mean that it's not serious, per se, but it means it is humor. So methodology was like a lot of philosophy of humor and a philosophy of play, and applying it like to empirics, to this ethnography of CPAC, doing field work, to view the surroundings of joy, pleasure, and humor at this 4-day conference, talk to through qualitative, semi-structured interviews to former and current MAGA supporters as well, and also did some quantitative work just to see, like, these couple of months he used so much humor in these rallies, so it's very significant, or he used so much humor in his tweets. And my main, so particularly I analyzed how politicians, mainly Trump, I guess, also some Dutch politicians use humor, and how people respond to that, right? And my main argument, my main claim of my thesis, and hopefully I will submit it next week. And Susie Metsa is also a very great place to kind of work on that, right? I should have submitted to Susie Metsa in Estonia, but I didn't, I'm sorry. But my main claim is, in far-right politics, humor manifests itself as a central mobilizing and radicalizing principle. So it mobilizes people and radicalizes also these negative emotions, these grievance politics, angry people, cynical people who are done with the political order, and it mobilizes through like sustained joy and humor, and it potentially reinforces cruelty, even violence, and political cynicism. Which is kind of ironic, this last part, because it's, on the one hand, it creates political mobilization for cynical voters, right? So people are very cynical and go into the MAGA movement because they see like this figure who jokes about everything. He doesn't care about any political rule. He's politically incorrect. They love that. Everybody pointed out in my interviews, like they love that. But it still creates more cynicism. So it's not that the political mobilization, because people are politically mobilized, makes them less cynical, but makes them more cynical. Because also the fun, but also the radicalism of saying edgy stuff, keeps transgressing, makes them more, cynical about politics. So one implication, amongst others, is that dark play, that's deceptive, over-serious play without spatial and temporal demarcation, I will explain it further on, dominates modern political culture. So before moving on to the second, to the most important part of humor ethics, I want to show how Johan Huizinga is a Dutch cultural historian. Sorry, Dutch guy, but I'm Dutch, of course. But he's one, but still, without being Dutch, it doesn't really matter because he's the first person who really systemically analyzed play as like a very important element in political and cultural discourse. The second thing is I will explain what dark play really is. And the third thing is how I will kind of show how it's like a cultural symptom, but also a political strategy used by these far-right actors, used by people like Trump. And the fourth part is that I will show how the play ethic could be a solution maybe to this dark play that dominates political discourse. Johan Huizinga, he wrote Homo Ludens. And first of all, if there are any analytical philosophers, I'm not analytical or continental per se, I think I'm more analytical, but analytical philosophers would hate Huizinga because he's all over the place. So you can interpret him in multiple ways. But what's the weird stuff with Huizinga is that he first starts out with giving a very formal definition of play. He says like play is only when it's characterized by rules. So you have a football game, football field, people follow rules, and people stick to the rules. And it's like a realm outside of the normal world, outside the ordinary, serious world. So you have this game, it's 90 minutes, afterwards it's done. Before it's ordinary world, afterwards ordinary world. And you have this kind of magic circle which is created. And a lot of people say, like, in response, but play, that's not necessarily true, right? Because play can also be very serious. He says it as well, by the way. And play is not necessarily fair. People can cheat. People can do other stuff. But at the end, he makes a very weird move. And I think that's why you have to read him normative, is that he says, like, he makes all these examples, and it was like in the 1930s he wrote this. So he wrote about Nazi play. How the Nazi parties were like also doing a lot of theatrical stuff. You have a lot of rallies, and they seemed very playful as well. But he said it does not really play, it's false play. He called it false play or bad play. But the interesting part of it is that he got attacked because of that. He said, like, but it's still play, and it still falls under your category of play. So why would you say it's bad or false play? But what's interesting is that Huizinga, at the end, the last sentence, he kind of clears up for me, and he says, well, our ethical consciousness must decide whether we approach something as play or serious. Which means that I believe, but I'm not building on Huizinga per se, maybe a bit, but it's not that I'm think that he's completely right in everything, but it means that he saw that people can play in very bad ways and very good ways. So we have like to let our morality decide when to play. This kind of falls into like this virtual ethics mode already, if you see this. So to play or to be serious is an ethical choice. And it really feared also over serious in modern culture. That people don't perceive anymore that they're playing. So for instance, when you're playing a football game, then you know after 90 minutes it's done. Then you have this like good reflexivity about yourself when you're playing or not, when you're serious or when you're playing. But at a Nazi rally, it's very playful, very theoretical, maybe also at a Trump rally, but it's not very clear whether these people are still knowing whether if they're replaying or not. So people lose that reflexivity of whether they play or not. So there's like a play-serious boundary sort of distinction. And in modernity, he argues that it's a bit of a continental argument, I guess, that we lose that, this reflexivity that we don't really know to be both inside and outside the game simultaneously, which is very important for him. This will all be cleared up, hopefully, in a couple of moments. But then the most important part, dark play. Dark play refers mostly to the word dark, which talks about deception, which is important because a lot of people say like dark play, yeah, it's dark because dark means like it's dangerous or something. Yes, it could be dangerous, it could be a potential feature, but it is mostly because it's play which works on deception. So when Trump makes a joke, when Trump says, I'm going to be a dictator with a smile, then other people, mostly the liberals, don't really know whether he's joking or not, right? So he's deceiving, he's kind of playing with these people as play objects. But you can also think about this in real life, in your own social life, right? Maybe when you're making fun of your partner and say something like, well, I'm not going to do the dishes today, with a smile. And you're kind of playing, kind of seeing how far you can go, but you're also deceiving your partner that you're making a joke. So that's dark play. The dark play, everybody dark plays some days, And it's really built on two things, on deception, but also on pleasure. You have to kind of have fun in deceiving the other. And in political theory, you have a lot of work on manipulation as well. So it's not always manipulation, but when people manipulate and have a lot of fun doing it, and pleasure is the main goal behind it, by deceiving the other, then it is dark play. It has like two necessary features, which are already like the humorous gratification of confusing the other, like confusing those liberals, those Democrats, see how they respond. Right-wing people really love that. And there's also this deception where they talk about that the other people who are like played with as kind of toys don't know whether they're still in the game or not. There you have like this more, if also a possible feature that it's about personas, that you kind of act out personas. Like Trump, for instance, a lot of officials, like people around him, have said when he comes on stage on a Trump rally, that it feels like he transforms a bit. He becomes a persona. He becomes like a performative wrestling persona. In the US, Trump was also famous because he attended a lot of performative wrestling shows, which also use dark play a lot, like deceiving the audience being very, very theoretical, very playful, and that you don't really know where the line between reality and fiction is anymore. And then I have the fourth element, dark absorption, which is very important, is that there is potentially some gradual confusion between play and reality, between play and seriousness. So what's important with dark absorption is that it's kind of conditional. I call this pre-situational ambiguity, which is a bit of a difficult word, but what I mean is then, for instance, is a harsh example, but when somebody is suicidal and jokes about killing themselves and is playing with their friends about this joke, then this person themselves maybe doesn't really know whether they're serious or not. Trump, it's on record that he really appreciates dictators. It's on record that he denies elections. So we're not really sure if Trump himself even knows whether he's playing or not. And we see also in our own lives, if we sometimes really know whether we're serious. But for instance, with my example, when I say to my girlfriend, "Oh, I don't want to do the dishes," even if that's kind of a dark play to her. But maybe I try to fix something, maybe I'm half serious about it. And I think if you think about examples in your own life, you see that these jokes, these playing with the others, sometimes it's kind of in the middle. And when it's in the middle, when people are what I call situational ambiguity about this, then it's possible that there is this kind of radicalization to more serious. That Greenland jokes become more serious. But it starts with a joke, but it becomes more serious. Or like joking about being addictive, right? And now I will try to show how dark play is so politically dominant right now. It also this confusion between play and serious, what I talked about already, seems to dominate modern culture as well. Some critical theorists talked about it and said that we live like in an age where humor or hilarity is very important, or we live like a permanent carnival or like permanent liminality, so that everything is kind of playful and serious at once. And I kind of like see how, or try to say like dark play creates this, amongst other conditions, creates this feature of modern culture, that we're kind of losing this playful reflexivity that Huizinga talked about. But for instance, an example, like a practical example, like dark play in Trumpism. So for instance, this pre-situational ambiguity. So we don't know whether playful or serious, right? Already starts at a rally, because the rally is I've been to Trump rallies. It's very, very fun, it comes on like as a rock star, and it really resembles like a formative wrestling show and stuff. But it's also very serious. He talks about serious policies, but he's making a lot of jokes, he's laughing, everybody has costumes. It feels like a carnivalesque thing, right? But it's also very serious. So there's already this pre-situational ambiguity, this tension between play and seriousness. Humor plays a big role. There's gratification, one feature of dark play, mocking the fake news, making jokes, but never revealing your attention, never saying like, it was a joke, I'm not serious. Always keeping this confusion. And also this playing out personas. For instance, beautiful example is Hulk Hogan. He also comes on as personas once at a rally, but also Trump becomes kind of a persona during this rally of a tough guy, tough humorous guy. But also this absorption, we can see like how rallies become more serious, that everybody is in costumes, but at the end of the rally, January 6th, people were violent, we're fighting, we're going to the Capitol, right? Or how lock her up chants, for instance, about Hillary Clinton started out as something fun as well. But he was also semi-serious about it, right? And people got more serious about it as well. And it really relates to other theories about Trump and performative wrestling, connections between that, but also how Trump and carnival are related. Carnivalesque theories really talk about transgression and how Trump transgresses like democratic norms, right, during his rallies, and having fun in doing that. This is one example I want to show you. Look at time. Yeah, I think I'm doing good. Wait. Oh, now I'm completely spoiling some stuff. Well, maybe I have to be a bit more. This is maybe one example I want to show you how there is this, people don't really know how to engage with something playfully or serious right now. So people lack this disposition in this example. Oh.
For a second one, I have 24 Trump 2028 hats. His folks keep sending me.
And you think he's gonna run again?
Who spends $200 million on a ballroom at their home and then leaves the house? This is serious, guys. This is serious.
It'll be Newsom Trump in 28.
No, this guy doesn't believe in free, fair elections. He tried to wreck this country. Were you there January 6th? I think Fox was, at least they weren't a lawsuit. They seem to have lost any memory of that. Shareholders did. I mean, he tried to light democracy on fire. He dialed for 11 of those 12,000 votes. Now he's doing it in plain sight. And people said, oh, just Trump being Trump. But people actually think this guy's serious about having another election. You think he's joking about 2028? You think when he brings foreign leaders to the Oval Office and he goes to the White House store, have you seen this? Anyone? Is it just me? And he shows them the 2028 hats. He's not being serious. Wake up. You will lose your country. Again, it's not about Democrats.
Yeah, I think this is a great example, right? Of people are responding playfully, laughing a bit, but he says like, we're serious, right? This is a serious threat. This is what people would say maybe is like a feature of modern culture that we don't really see or really know when to perceive something as play or serious anymore. There was even like an article in The Guardian like a couple of months ago about this, which is very interesting. But I hope to show you one more example. It's about Nick Fuentes. He's like a white nationalist, extreme right guy. Some say even neo-Nazi, but he's also using a lot of humor. And he says like, he clearly uses dark play. He always defends himself and says he was just playing and being bombastic about Holocaust jokes, about denying whatever. And here's in an interview, he goes to like mainstream podcasts, mainstream like kind of not extreme right podcasts or like conservative podcasts, and he says this kind of things to like say, yeah, I'm just having fun, you know, people should have fun. And in this way, people are kind of exploiting this modern day confusion between play and seriousness and using dark play.
Say your answer.
I consider myself to be relatively moderate. I have a provocative sense of humor. I'm pretty bombastic, but there was this time of immense.
Yeah, I will keep moving on. But what he also says is very interesting. He calls himself somewhat of a comedian, which is very important. Because also comedians nowadays, you could also see Trump as a comedian. What he did before 2015, he was like being comedic. He was like a reality TV show star. He performative wrestling star, right? But also even in Ukraine, I mean, that's maybe on the other side of the spectrum, but Zelensky is a comedian as well. You see how political comedians, but also political shows, you know, that are comedic get way more important, serious attention nowadays, especially when people are more cynical about traditional media. So this is like a cultural symptom as well. Not only, that's what I try to argue about dark play. So it transgresses like, it normalizes far-right ideology about being a dictator, about like transgressing democratic norms, but also by Fuentes, by making racist remarks. Think also about like Trump tweeting like last week or something, this thing about this meme about this racist meme video about the Obamas as primates, right? And always saying was just fun, was just having a joke. And this clearly normalizes far-right ideas, but also destabilizes this play serious boundary that people don't really know that they're watching their news and getting comedic news and think that's normal. I don't really know this difference between play and serious anymore. It is affective bonding, like emotional bonding, laughing together at these crazy liberals, but also ideological bonding. Like if you keep on joking about this transgressive norms, or keep on playing with often with like marginalized communities, with, for instance, black people or queer people, then it's the norm to play with those people, right? That's all as something ideological. And it's also embedded in this irony poisoned internet culture, right, of transgression and laughter, which is very important. So I argue like dark play is both a symptom and strategy of modern politics. That's the question, how to cultivate an ethical sensibility of play and humor. How much time do I still have?
Well, like 15, 20, let's say 20 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, quickly say something about humor theory, the humor theory all the other like humor accounts use. Then I will go to humor ethics. It's a very short meta discussion about is humor ethics even necessary, or can standard moral theory account for this dark play stuff? Then I will focus on humor virtue ethics, show the problems with current humor virtue ethics, and then I will come to my solution. So this play is like this practical wisdom of knowing when to be playful or when to be serious. I already kind of hinted at that, right? Most humor theories say humor is about incongruities or transgressions. And there are also other humor theories, I won't bother you with that, but that's the meaning that there are always like incongruities surrounding us, right? Even when you're speaking, there are like 5 incongruities. For instance, when I do this for a long time, that's already an incongruity, right? Something goes wrong. Then you can maybe some people start laughing already. But people are not necessarily laughing at every incongruity, which is like a mismatch, something that doesn't really fit, right, with your expectations. So there needs to be like a non-bona fide or like a playful mode, that people are playful when people start to engage with these incongruities. And in evolutionary theory, they argue that this started around when, for instance, we were like hunters and gatherers, and we thought we saw something like a lion. Oh, the lion came up to us. Oh, there's a tree. And there's a release of tension of this incongruity, and people started laughing out of this tension, right? There was an error detection, and there's nothing going on. So there's always something with this mismatch, right? This incongruity. But why and when do people laugh at this stuff? So often it deals with surprise, but most people say, and I agree with that, there needs to be some form of playfulness, like to not take it that seriously, right? Some people say it's benignness, like if somebody slips over a banana, then nobody really dies or gets injured, so it's benign. But I don't really agree with that, because people can really have really dark sense of humor. Maybe people find it funny when people die. That's also transgression, incongruity, right? But there needs to be some form of play, that people find it playful, fun, this incongruity, and not threatening. Because that can be an incongruity and transgression, right? Something that you don't expect. You don't find it all funny. But most works, and I already worked a bit with Leland Meestek from Finland, kind of close by, that's fun, from Tampere. And we say when we look at most works of philosophy of humor, people don't really expand on what play really is. So they say, yeah, incongruities, people found incongruities funny when condition 1, it is playful. But what is playful? Because most people say, yeah, it's non-serious, like a non-serious mode. But we can play can be also very serious. We can be in a chess game and be very serious. We can play football and be very serious, right? But sometimes when it's defined, and then already kind of happy when people define play, then it's autotetic, done for its own sake. So not for external factors, not for money, not for anything, but you've done for the pleasure itself, right? We argue like there's a playful transgression theory, and play is engagement, prioritizing above ordinary rules and norms and conventions. So play is like a playful organization of context, and we playful engage, we prioritize the engagement of of our own rules of this football game, for instance, than over other more serious ordinary rules, such as you shouldn't kick a ball around, or you should speak to people normal when you're making jokes, for instance. And humor specifically is prioritizing engagement with a transgression, with an incongruity. I'll go a bit more quickly, but I understand quickly humor as comic amusement, as an emotion, like this. And it's not necessarily laughter, because not all laughter is humor. Only 20% of most laughter, if you count it out, like in a social conversation, is response to humorous stimuli. Most is like awkwardness, or like just laughing, just as a response to other people laughing. So it's an emotion, it's feeling of humor, right? That arises when you playfully engage with transgressions. The last part I will skip. But most humor ethics are focused with criticizing racist or sexist humor, or anointing humor as a virtue of an Aristotelian virtue, eutrapelia. And I will argue, like, there are some people who work like, you say, like, the humor is beyond the realm of ethics, because a joke is playful, play is not serious, therefore humor, if done properly, shouldn't be in the realm of ethics because it's not serious, and ethics is serious. With some conditions provided, right? And there's like this, what I call like humor moralism, is by Likan, and he argues like there's not even like a separate humor ethics necessary. Standard moral theory suffices to check, to evaluate humor, like transgressive humor, like racist jokes, for instance. Gibbel's theory, which is like more amoral, he argues, like, I won't go into that regarding time, but he argues that play is done for its own sake, and humor takes part like in a playful context, and therefore is the playful context is fitted right, this play frame, then ethics shouldn't be humor should be permitted ethically, right? People's ethics, you can say the most horrible jokes, but if it's done in this playful context and when it's communicated right, then we shouldn't deal with it. So yeah, this playful part is very morally significant, right? So that makes humor distinct, and that's why it needs a different theory than standard moral theory. But Likan says, like, which is the most important part, that's something that Gimbel doesn't do, is that most humor ethics kind of don't see what they're really dealing with. So they properly lack to distinguish objects of moral evaluation. Some people say they're judging, evaluating humor, but they're only judging jokes, which is like a subset of humor. Or they're talking about humor and laughter and conflating those terms. But humor is not necessarily laughter per se, they're more like they're cousins of each other, right? If you look at it empirically. And also there's like a confusion whether it's like speaker centered or audience centered, because the construction of a joke is more as to deal with cleverness. That's what, like, being quick, being a bit clever, working with incongruities. But the perception has more to do with like the feeling, when the taste, humorous taste, right? So, and most humor ethics kind of fail in being very precise in this. And in that sense, maybe I could say it out loud, that they're not very good in that sense, right? So Likan says it's interesting if you look at mirth. The most interesting questions come if you look at like this audience reception, like, if we laugh at something, if we have fun, if we experience mirth, this comic amusement, can it be immoral? Or the same, even if it's like a quick response, if we laugh at a racist jokes, that's an interesting moral question. But he also says, like, well, maybe it's not very interesting because standard moral theory, consequentialism, can deal with this. And he criticized Gimbel, and he says, like, this. Gimbel uses like an example of the Friars Comedy Club as like a prototypical example. Okay, this is like a play frame. It's completely, no real life gets through it. It's completely playful. But he argues like that's not true, because people get really offended sometimes and get really serious about his jokes because of examples of this against this Friars Comedy Club as like a pure sphere of play. It's not impenetrable. In fact, play philosophy says that as well. Like, play is always like play world. If we create like a fun game, or if we create like if we play football, it's always built on the building blocks of reality. It's always connected. You can never like play is never like completely outside the real world, outside reality. So he's partially correct in that sense, but he also argues that it's completely solvable with moral theory, like the ontology of utilitarianism, and that is maybe not so interesting in humor ethics. I think like politically what's happening right now, it's very important and interesting. And I also don't agree that there's not that a specific special place of analyzing humor is not necessary. Because if you look at this, deontology, if you look at dark humor or humor themselves, that most theories deal with humor and they don't think about the possibility that humor is done seriously or half seriously. That there is not, they always think, okay, when we judge humor in these prototypical cases, then it's like a humorous intent, it was non-serious. But if you look at reality, political reality as well, but also social reality, it's more blurred, right? So it's very, and besides that, it's very difficult to judge humor in terms of Kantianism if you see humor as something inherently cruel. Some theories argue that it is inherently cruel because the Joker has like an unequal relationship with the audience. And one of the best theories of what humor really is, because you have like this people who say like the saying like humor always reveals the truth. He says, no, that's not true, but humor always is like an as-if deception. It's not, it's always based on a transgression between two norms, like an incongruity, like this mismatch. And it reveals to us like a different kind of possibility, but it doesn't mean it's objective. It's like a deceptive possibility. The ontology would almost immediately say like everything deception, oh, that's wrong, right? And would be, I think, too strict in humor as autonomy violating. So if you dark play with your partner, it will be too strict, I think. And utilitarianism, yeah, can it measure automatic behavior? Would it count like harsh humor, like if everybody has a lot of fun with laughing at a victim, would it count those pleasures as well? But the most part is, you know, due to its playful core of humor, which makes it, if you believe that makes it morally distinct, then the biggest problem is that how to measure, if it's even possible, to what extent somebody was playful or not. You can also decide we should not even take it into account and say everybody was sort of serious, or say it's always in between. But it's very difficult to measure that, right? And to decide that, right? That's why most humor ethics start with prototypical cases, like the person was not serious, the person was humorous, and he made a racist joke or a sexist joke. Is he like morally irresponsible? Whatever. And in this sense, I think virtue ethics, but also because a lot of literature about this, makes a more common sense way to evaluate humor. It can take into account intent, motives, and context. And there are broadly two schools, like one that's the most popular school right now that argues humor is a virtue. The second one is that argues that humor is not a virtue, and I hope to go towards the third school with me, and I think Walker would also, Zoe Walker, she would also fall under the line with this school, that the virtuous sense of humor is possible to cultivate, but not that humor is necessarily a virtue. But I will start with the first school, and eutrapelia, that is translated as wittiness, and conceptualized nowadays as humor, serious playfulness, or gracious playfulness. And it's often conceptualized like in a conversation, like in a social context. And it is an auto-regarding virtue, according to Aristotle, used in dialogue and conversations, right? And it's together in the realm of pleasure, together with friendliness and social conduct or truthfulness, which with speaking with decorum. The definition of vice is borousness, when you're very boring, when in conversation with each other, you never make a joke. You don't laugh. That's very bad. That's vicious. An excessive one is you make jokes all the time. For instance, if I only make jokes right now, it will be a bit. Aristotle would say it's vicious. It's morally very bad because it's you have to kind of know your audience. I sometimes make a joke with like almost this kind of British humor, like a bit in the middle. Finding this golden mean. This and most work right now argues due to the incongruous nature, to its duality of humor, to working with this mismatch, right? And to pleasure, it gives us perspectivity or mutual recognition or social connection or a kind of self-content. But the two above are most important for me. They argue it's incongruity creates like a double vision. You laugh at something and you realize that others' world is possible. You see like the doubleness of worlds. You see that the world is not perfect. Nothing aligns perfectly. That creates perspectivity or like a mutual recognition. You recognize like there's something else possible. And you recognize it into the other when you're laughing together, when you have the same sense of humor. I won't get into the nitty-gritty part, also due to time, but basically this is the most important feature to virtue ethics. This makes it also a virtue, humor. And it even leads to better civic education, more friendships, and even better political skills and political citizenship. But the problem is for instance, but I think when a person is virtuously honest or friendly, the main target is that there's an excellent core of this concept. So honestly, friendliness, the core of the concept itself is morally good when you're friendly or honest, right? But what's this about humor? Because if the core of humor is incongruity, and if we see how incongruities can be like can be recognized and can be very politically very bad, then it's completely contextual whether this perspectivity, even if it exists, or mutual recognition is good. It's just incongruous. It's just that you see like there's somewhat a transgression, but it's not necessarily that this core of incongruity is morally excellent. This is my argument, right? Why I think it's not. So the core feature is incongruous, transgressive. It's not mutual recognitivity or perspectivity bring. In fact, like this, maybe this could be like a consequence. I think it could be possible, but it's not like an excellent core in humor itself. The cause of humor itself is pleasure and incongruity, according to me, right? You can disagree. In fact, like this, it's more often deceptive than like truthful or objective. So what are you talking about? What is this perspectivity per se or recognition? Can be a racist recognition or perspectivity. I don't know. And amusement is not necessarily good or bad as well, not a core. So just like humor, I don't know if it's a perfect example, but like cooking is not a virtue. I can cook poison or like Michelin star cuisine for my friends, I can laugh, I can make racist jokes, I can make very fun jokes. And I also think this like conversation kind of setting of virtue ethics, I think that is like also politically what we're dealing with right now, not very relevant. And what's most important, they completely neglect the vice of dark play, because I see dark play as a vice. Something clearly goes wrong, right? I think I have to work it out why it is a vice, but I think it's very easy, like deception, having fun in playing with the other. I think like it's very autonomy violating already. So I think you can easily make the argument it's a vice. More than Boris as a buffoonery, in my exception. But all those accounts right now in literature neglect that. They don't work on dark play or this. And they also treat these studies, what I talked about already, they also always treat it in the context of the play and series as binary opposites. Always like, okay, somebody was joking and the person was non-serious. The person was playful. But if we look at dark play and what's happening, but also at social life, it's kind of in the middle. It's more hybrid. It's more fluid. So it doesn't really reflect reality. So the first school misunderstands core features of humorous incongruity as aiming at goodness, misinterprets the play series boundary as a stable one, and overlooks the important political vice of dark play. Well, political also social vice. You have the other argument, which is humor is not a virtue. Virtuous people can be humorous, according to Gia and us, but horrible people can be humorous. But virtuous people can be maybe completely not funny. And if humor is virtuous, then it's maybe because it's kind or honest. There's a stronger version. It's not really virtue ethics, but Plato. Plato is one of the first proponents, according to like it's like yeah. Not I don't know if Plato would agree with this, but people would say he's a proponent of the superiority theory, that humor always is virtuous because it obstructs reason. It's fun, you don't think reasonably, so it's very bad. And it always expresses superiority, which is a bit extreme. I think that's it. But yeah, funny is, I think when Anas talks about humor, she talks about funniness, which is very subjective. So I think, but I still agree that Donald Trump is definitely humorous. I don't find him funny per se, but he's definitely humorous. And I also agree with this thing that humor is not per se a virtue. A virtuous sense of humor is possible. Zoe Walker argued like 2 years ago, 1 year ago, that virtuous humor sense can be possible and can be cultivated, but if we compare it to erotic taste. Erotic taste can be very, you know, if you like crazy stuff, I won't go into details, I won't ask any of you, but if you like very crazy sexual stuff, you look at online when you're home, and then is that very immoral? Is that bad? But you can compare it to humorous taste. If you laugh at very racist jokes, is it very bad? Those responses are somewhat also like you cannot. It's also very quick. It's very sudden. So it's not, but it's not very immorally bad immediately. However, she argues, and Likan also argues, that a lot of empirical research shows that habitation, which is also very virtue ethics-wise, is working on something, right? Working on creating a better position, better character, is possible also with erotic taste. So it should also be possible with humorous taste, which is an argument they make, and I agree. And I think this third school where I want to go, where I want the literature to go as well, is what Huizinga would also say something of the same. It's not a virtue ethics is, but it would say that the ethical consciousness needs to decide when we engage with something as play or not. And why still virtue ethics and another theory? Because habitation, working on this better sense of humor, better taste of humor is necessary. It's like learning a skill, learning a better skill of humor. This practical wisdom of deciding when to be playful, when to be serious. So when you come across with this funny Trump guy, he's laughing a bit, but he wants to throw your country into hell, wants to become a dictator, you know, maybe you shouldn't laugh, you should deal with it seriously, right? And it's also very sensitive to context, because sometimes maybe you can be very cruel in humor. Sometimes there's a bully in your group and you can make a horrible joke and it helps the other people. Or just making an example, right? Context, I think context is important. I do the same thing again. Okay. So my theory of humor, so humor is a comic amusement that arises emotion when we playfully engage with transgressions, but we can habitate ourselves to when and how we playfully engage with congruent transgressions. We need to cultivate a practical play wisdom. And it's not only knowing when to play, when to, or not when to play and when not to play, when to engage with something with playfulness or with seriousness, but it's also how to play. And I argue that this concept of ambivalent action from sociology is very useful. I think there could be also other concepts, but which says that you can be that shows like duality of actions, when some actions can be both. There can be both. So you can be both inside and outside the game simultaneously. This is like this play reflexivity we talked about. So when you're playing a game that you know you're playing, you're inside the game, but you're also, you know, there's also a world outside the game. And this is what Huizinga thought went wrong at Nazi rallies. Maybe this also goes wrong at like political rallies, Trump play, when everything becomes very humorous, that people lose this reflexivity, this ambivalent actions, this ambivalence in play. And so moral agents need to learn to keep and sustain this reflexivity. Ambivalent action, example was like the Black Lives Matter movement, where you have this black box, or when you are both silent, where you're saying like, okay, we're signaling I'm silent, and we'll take a step back, but you're also simultaneously speaking out. You're doing two things. I think that's also very relatable to play, right? You're being playful and serious. You're being inside and outside the game. Esposito also worked on this a bit, on being both inside and outside the game. That's very important. And it also relates to Eugen Fink, is also a philosopher, on his play ontology. I won't go into details with that, but how play worlds are always built on lots of reality, and there's always this double personality of play, he calls it. You're also in and outside. You're playing full and seriousness simultaneously. Dark play loses this capacity. It becomes more serious. It radicalizes people. That's why it's a vice. That's why this is necessary. So yeah, the wisdom of when. Yeah, maybe I need some help with this. Maybe there's a fun theory to apply. Maybe it's not even necessary. So this prophonus, like this practical wisdom of knowing to address enjoy transgressions and incongruities, and it depends on the context, of course. I would think about that as well. Yeah, I made a fun Greek word like paida, that's the word for playfulness, used by Aristotle, and prophonus like this. It's like a meta, maybe it's like a meta virtue. Because I think that if you look at playfulness, like play is also very important in cultivating other virtues. That's why, for instance, if you look at this idea of moral exemplars, which is very important in virtue ethics, that you have to mimic somebody. That's also kind of playing out stuff, learning how to be. Also, if you learn a skill, if you use that analogy, you kind of play to learn a skill. But I'm not completely there yet. I haven't written it all out, like the gritty stuff. But I'll think about that. But I think that this. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there is a virtue of humor, and I'm missing this. But I think it's more like a meta level, like this practical wisdom of knowing when to play or when not to play. I think it solves this tension in literature by treating how they treat the play serious boundary as a stable one, that some agent is always humorous or always or non-humorous, and it's not like something in between. And it also misses and also incorporates the virtue of dark play. Yeah, I think for virtue studies, but also for my studies, maybe I should cultivate or work on how this practical play wisdom is meta virtue, because with learning play is necessarily involved. And how can we cultivate this wisdom of play reflexivity? I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I'm sorry if it wasn't too much into nitty-gritty details of everything, but I hope I've gave a good overview of how the literature is working and what I want to do. And I want to thank you very much, and also see that there's some work of me coming out. It's all very interdisciplinary, so I need, for my career, I need to do something in an ethics field. So hopefully we will work together, and I can submit it to an ethics journal. But this is also new work if you're interested. It's all on this empirical work of what I did in the US. And I'm once again very thankful to be here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you follow it a bit. And yes, thank you again.
Thank you. Now for questions. I think we should switch over to the broad microphone, right? So the microphone would also.
Do it. Is there anybody online?
I think they're recording it.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the questions, we have about 30 minutes exactly. Sorry. I'm seeing Heidi, and the others can raise their hands.
Well, thank you so much. This was very fascinating. I would like to go back to your ethics slide with the deontology and utilitarianism.
Yeah.
So I was a bit confused there because by this deontological blanket rejection humor, and you say there that deontology would quickly reject any humor as autonomy violating due to humor presenting an as-if deception and a cruel, unequal relationship between the joker and the audience. So I'm just thinking from like a very general Kantian perspective. I have not read those specific authors there, but I'm wondering what, like, could you explain what exactly is the ground to think that there is this kind of deceptive intent there that would like make it a Kantian problematic in a Kantian way? Because one way to look at the matter would be to say that this is precisely why this dark humor is problematic, that there is this intent of deception or a note of deceptiveness precisely in dark humor. But here you attribute this deceptiveness to humor in general. So yeah, how would you explain it?
I think this is very sharp. I already thought about whether I would put this in because I go very quick. Also with this, I mentioned this literature about Barrichello and Giammario, and I don't really explain this that much, right? Without going into details. Yeah, I wondered about this as well, but I still think if you look at most work, that there are proper arguments to be made. Like for instance, that if you make a joke, like a bit of stretch, I think as well. If you make a joke, then there's necessarily in the beginning before it gets resolved, there's some form of deception of the audience that you know where is this going to, and they already know that they're making a joke, but there's like some inherent that creates this sort of cruel relationship. I think this is a bit of a stretch, maybe. Maybe it could like, but I also think like with virtue ethics, it still works better than the ontology. And I think this argument that it kind of fails to measure like the amount of playfulness, what I say like this, like take it into account. I think that is the best argument against like more standard moral theories. Why virtue ethics with this like sensitivity to context is more useful. But I understand what you mean, because you could make maybe the argument of, yeah, dark play doesn't expose the deception of when they play with the other, and that's why it's autonomy violating. That's why it's vice, and other jokes and proper humor, or not like autonomy violating humor, won't do that. Maybe there's something into that, but. And I also have to look back at these works that argue like how humor is necessarily like works on deception or works on this cruel relationship, if it makes sense. Because my first goal was already going into virtue ethics. So I understand what you're saying, and I think I will look at that. Do you think it would be more interesting to go into like the Kantian route, or?
Well, I think it would be interesting to see how there might be then these different levels of deceptiveness, or I mean, even at the moment it was simply this obvious fact that this dark play is so much related to deceptiveness, but how do you bring apart these like different levels when Kantian theory says that all humor is deceptive? So this was just more of a conceptual confusion, but I mean, I'm not that pessimistic about the Kantian route.
I didn't see that. Yeah. And what's interesting about these works is that they say, yeah, humor is deceptive and cruel. They don't really make like a normative judgment out of it, because it can be a lot of fun and not necessarily bad. Cruelty is, I mean, this word like Barrichello even says like humor and cruelty are necessarily linked, but yeah, life is inherently cruel, so whatever. But it's a very interesting work, Barrichello. If you're looking for something to read, there are 5 books, like 5 volumes of the philosophical treatises, like almost all accounts, like in mostly Western, but also non-Western philosophies of humor and cruelty and how they're connected. There are 5 big volumes, and they came out like around the 2022, 2023. It's very interesting. it's a tough pill, but it's interesting.
So Chopin, do you have a follow-up or a new question?
A new question.
Okay, then we go to Margit.
Yeah, thank you very much. I very much enjoyed it. And also in the background is that I have been sometimes asked actually, are there any things that you cannot make laugh at or I mean, all these kind of also like in political fields. But my question is also about dark play, and and the question is, what are actually the defining features that turn dark play into something vicious rather than simply playful? And you have this 4 elements inspired by Richard Schechner, I think, yeah?
Yeah.
Where he said it's gratification, concealment, or absorbance and dark absorption. And I was just thinking whether there is also some kind of element of that there is some kind of marked by asymmetry and contempt, like belittling or humiliating the other. It's also what we call laughing at them, the same kind of thing about bananas, and somebody is actually hurt, but you are just laughing at it. So the question is it also the element of just dark play becoming vicious when it humiliates, belittles, or mocks someone, and often with that arrogant sense of superiority? And this is exactly, to my mind, what Trump is doing. I mean, one thing is just like this kind of borderline is shifting, but on the other hand, it's also this kind of arrogance that is in his actions. And another thing that relates to this is also this kind of crossing the border or switching the borders. Also, what whole Carnival or Bakhtin's Carnival concept is saying that you do not know is it real or not. There is also a difficulty that you can't make anybody responsible. You do not use this word of responsibility, but in political discourse, I think this is very important. It's more like a second question, but I think it is, in some sense related. So first thing, isn't it necessary to include another thing about dark play, this kind of feeling of arrogance or something like this, or belittling somebody else? And the other is there a place of the word for responsibility in this kind of political discourse?
Yeah, I think that's very, very interesting. And I think thank you. And very helpful as well. I already thought about this too, because I have to make the argument when dark play becomes a vice. Because I'm also skeptical to immediately say like, yeah, it's deceptive, so it's vicious. And for instance, if you like play with we do it all the time, play with like your partner, with your friends, but afterwards you expose the play and you say what Trump doesn't do, like say something like, hey, it was just a joke, I'm not serious, then it can maybe be morally permitted to some extent, or be less vicious. I think that was the thing I was thinking about, that this lack of exposure is very important in why it becomes vicious. I think I could include this like in like the first feature of gratification of this humor, this content. Maybe there's already inherent content if you play with the other as like a play object, with kind of superiority already involved necessarily if you play with somebody else and don't tell what you're doing. But I think it's very interesting to work on. I didn't really say it here, but like politically, like a political theory, especially also in my dissertation, like it's very clear that this all forms of political responsibility or accountability are just thrown away. You can always say it was a joke. You could always keep on playing and harassing the other side. So that makes it politically maybe very irresponsible. So yeah, I think it's very, I will definitely think about it and how to, and I think they all align perfectly with the concept. So yeah.
May I continue just for sense? I mean, I think it is just like saying let us think about this meme of Obama's lying primates.
Yeah.
I mean, in principle, you can always say, and he said also, on the one hand, actually, it became serious. He said it was not from me. It was interesting, isn't it? I mean, he did not say that I only played. He said this was not from me. But even if you would have said that, okay, I only played, the question then becomes actually, how is it received? And I think you had also this kind of slide saying that whether this humor is more like who is the speaking person or the receiving person.
Yeah.
But with this receiving person, this may be like also a group, isn't it? It's not only just one person, but how is it received? And the question is always the context. I mean, it's just like, I did not mean I made jokes about blacks. I did not mean it. I only made jokes about people who wear glasses or who are Jews or something. I did not mean anything bad, but you still actually can be blamed or just being doing something wrong or going into dark play because, I mean, and now this is more the question, is it like your intention that matters, or is it also your responsibility to understand in which context it is received or how the reaction comes? Because this is where all the political correctness thing comes in, isn't it? That we say that you need to be careful. Political correctness basically means that you need to be careful because some people may feel harmed. Not because you intend to harm them. On the other hand, there is something hidden in. Sometimes you still want, you just are not aware, you are perhaps not wanting to harm them, but you feel superiority. You are arrogant and you don't care about how they actually react and things like this. So I think in some sense it becomes more complex. It's not only the intention or how it is received, but also the communication that is going between these different parts of the Communication Act.
I completely agree. I think that's why virtue ethics can be helpful as well, because it's more useful when you work on with the entire context. What I found interesting about dark play, because it kind of goes beyond attention to some extent for me, like because it's so unclear what the intent is. And the fact that you're playing or having fun with, for instance, comparing like Obama's as with primates, which is inherently this having fun with that is very morally problematic. And also maybe like playing with other people as objects is more problematic. But then we're talking about dark play, because you can also make jokes, about whatever, and then about something very transgressive, very not politically correct. And then we can talk about the speaker, of course. Should the speaker make this joke about this content? But also about what I mostly talked about how does the speaker and the audience get enjoyment? Is it even ethical to get enjoyment out of racist jokes? Maybe not. I don't. Maybe it's not immediately very bad because it's like maybe like a primal response that you're laughing out of this surprise of incongruity. But if there is a possibility, what work seem to argue, so what empirical research also shows, that you can habituate like a better sense of humor, then it's not a virtuous sense of humor, right? But it's very it's complex, I think. And I also got like a similar other question about when I was presenting my research, but mostly like not the ethical part, but the other part, like the dissertation. And he got like, have you researched like how it is for like the people who get dark plates? I thought, no, I didn't even, which is a bit bad of me. I didn't really think about it. that much, like how the experience is of people who are being played, right? And not only, because I only focus like, okay, these people are using these rhetorical tools, they're dark playing with other people, they're for fun, but I never really thought, okay, what does it mean like for those people who are maybe trolled online or doxed or like being dark played, we're being very harmed. So yeah, I think it's very important to think about that, and I will reflect on how to include that in my paper.
Yeah. Then we had, sorry, I don't know your name, in the middle row. In the phone. You.
That would be me. Well, I had a question in regards to certain ethics. So it's more of a case of back down or double down. So in social media discourse, there is this whole culture of edgy jokes that, is pretty much dark play, as in how serious. And sometimes it goes to the meta level of saying, what if this isn't a joke? What if this is my extreme dogmatic opinion? So if a person actually does do this type of edgy jokes, and you are not sure if they actually mean it or they are basically trolling, how ethically correct is to just double down and be like, okay, let's play that game. I'm gonna double down on saying a dark play joke that is extremely, well, yeah.
Yeah.
How moral-wise, virtues?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe not that moral, right? So I think, but ethics can be a bit strict regarding humor. But then you're kind of saying that you're like in like communication with somebody, and this person online presumably makes very transgressive remarks. That's sort of a game, and you respond to it, but this person would have like this clearly an intention that they're unserious, but you don't know what if you're like
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. What's the reason? What's the reason why you're this? Is it just fun? Is it just aggressiveness? You're getting pleasure out of it?
I guess.
Or even deceiving the other that you're being serious, like deception upon deception.
Yeah, the deception above deception is kind of very enjoyable, as in them saying, "Wait, you're serious?" And playing this whole game of, I guess, being outrageous,
Yeah.
and of who will outrage the other. But usually it does fall into the whole that someone embraces an ideology that you think it's insane, but you take it on the most barest to just.
To make like an ironic point.
Yes.
Okay, but that's different, I guess. Yeah, depends on the context. I mean, I don't know. But then I think it's that's very interesting. But there is also very work that makes most of you a bit depressed about humor ethics. If you look at the empirics of it, if you look at very ironic racist jokes, so jokes that are so ironic, aimed to be so ironic that it's clearly we show like racism is bad and this doesn't make any sense. A bit what you're hinting at, right? One problem is that if you look at the uptake empirically, is still that a lot of people still enjoy the joke because it's about other races, and they enjoy the pleasure and don't see the irony. So you always, if you have like a big crowd, you always have this problem with for instance, when you're a politician or a public figure, if you look at it empirically. But if you're just the two of you, I don't know, it's contextual, but think about that. Yeah.
So Johan and then Francesco.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, but at the same time deeply disturbing. I wanted to ask you whether you see this dark play and this type of humor in relation to structural transformations in the media, because you immediately started off with these memes, and Margaret picked up on this about the reception of these memes, but this whole memes and there's a whole culture surrounding it, in which then with this digital blurring, right? Then we have post-truths, we don't know what's right or wrong. And of course, Trump is a master of this reality show, and he comes from reality show. So, I mean, the thing that's fascinating here is that you have the structural transformation of the public sphere, right? And with Habermas's early work in the 60s, but he recently actually updated the book. He's in his 90s and he updated it, you know, for the digital world, which maybe is interesting for you to look at, because then it raises questions of civility in politics, which is now nothing, right? But also this violence and questions of hate speech and freedom of speech, all these kind of things. But then here comes my question. The other time historically when we had a structural transformation of the media in such a way that also merged with radicalism with Weimar, and there was cabaret, there was really great humor and very dark, and there were costumes and there were boots and there were rallies. Do you see parallels?
I think this is such a... My immediate answer is yes, but this is such an insightful remark. I think that definitely it's a fact that this is a symptom of his time, Trump and his whole movement, and it's connected to like online internet culture. Definitely.
And you had their what's his name? Elon Musk wearing black. He's dark MAGA. Is his wearing dark MAGA? He is a meme. His body is a meme.
I think it's so interesting to connect it. I implicitly or sometimes within a sentence.
Maybe in the future.
With very interesting projects, and also with I think also the connections with that age, with the 90s, the 30s.
Dada. Cabaret.
It's very interesting. But it also depends, what I think is definitely a feature is there is a deep cynicism about the political order. And you also saw it in all my interviews. Everybody was very former Trump supporters who are now completely on the other side, more left side of the spectrum. They always keep being very cynical about political order. And I think the same applied, of course, to the 30s. So I think that is also the more the structure of mediums, mass mediums. I think that's very interesting.
And that Trump can say, I didn't post that. I just liked it and reposted it.
But it's also I haven't thought about that as well.
Right,
that's very interesting.
Yeah. Then you have a whole different author reception, re-reception, retweeting. Who is talking, when who's talking? The question. Yes. And then the name even social. This is a completely.
So,
Yes.
5 minutes for Francesco. So,
first, a little bit of a nationalistic theme, because I think my mom that now Silvio Berlusconi was one of the first to have humor as part of a political strategy. And people would generally, by the way, also people who voted against Berlusconi would enjoy his jokes. Which maybe means that we Italians take it a little bit lighter. That's a good joke, we laugh, no matter who makes it. But this wasn't very serious, but anyway. But the thing about erotic taste that you brought up at some point, right? That's interesting, because kind of brings in a different dimension that I don't quite see whether you discussed it or not, which is not quite ethics of humor, but it's more like the internal standards of humor, in a similar way as what some philosophers like Thomas Nagel thought about sexual desire, right? So sexual taste as well, as having its own standards of good and bad, perfection and imperfection, right? Which don't match the moral standards. So rape or a preference for forcing sex is immoral, right? By moral standards, is a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a perverted taste, according to Nagel at least, for reasons that I don't, anyway. And the other way around as well. So I mean, are you going into that kind of evaluation of humor, which is not strictly, or it's not moral, but it's more about like what makes for a good, not just a good joke, but I mean a good, exercise of humor, what makes for a bad exercise of humor as an exercise of humor, according to its own, debatable of course, but according to its own standards.
Interesting. I think I'm probably not gonna do that because it's not really my field. But I think it's very interesting what you're saying. Like, and there is some work on that, like how, to what extent, like humor can be objectively fun. If a joke can be, if there are some jokes that is inherently funny or something, there's something in the construct and it's inherently funny, yeah. But I think aesthetics, like I think you mentioned, that's what you mean, like the field of aesthetics could be interesting. And you called Thomas Nagel?
Yeah, this article, sexual perversion.
Oh, yeah. I don't even look. I will look into it because I don't know him, but I will look into it. Like,
because the erotic taste bit is like, well, some tastes are better than others, judge on their own like merits as erotic taste.
Yeah.
So Nagel, for example, would say that having an object fetish is not a very good erotic taste. It's not immoral, but it's not very like
interesting. I think it's very. I will look up his work because I use like the argument of Zoe Walker, and she used like a person called Ethan about erotic taste. So I will dive deeper into it. But I think it's very interesting where you're going. And by the way, like I'm going to Italy, to Rome for 3 months to research this in April. So you're on the nose.
So Janus, in 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. It was very interesting. So I was just wondering about Socratic irony, which Kierkegaard calls the essence of humor. And when we think about Socrates, then he pretends to be ignorant, right? To entice the other to make certain statements, and then he can attack them, right? So what we have, so what we have there, deception. We have their sense of superiority for sure. So we have all the elements of dark play, let's say. And if that's true, then we can say that the big part of philosophy is based on dark play. I mean, and so dark play in its essence is very ambiguous. So it can lead to knowledge, let's say further knowledge, let's say like Socrates did. But of course, it can also have like sides which are not so acceptable. So.
I love this. I think irony, dark play are often so connected as well. I think this is definitely Socratic irony is very interesting for me already. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it's also difficult to really pin down dark play as it's always vicious. I also don't want to do that. I think it's also, in a sense, it can also be very beautiful sometimes. If you look at the work of Schechner, he doesn't have like very problematic examples, but also like very beautiful examples of dark play, of people like just going to the edge of stuff, and even like this sounds a bit, like the most creation myths on Earth are like I don't know what's the myth, like the Sanskrit myth. There's a myth like in Indian methodology, and it's only based on dark play. And he also comes up with dark play because he knows a lot about Indian and Sanskrit methodology. So I think there's a lot of value already, but it's also superiority in it. It's also deceptive, and whether it's serious, it's very ambiguous as well. So it's a great example. It's a great example. Thank you.
Yeah. So We are out of time. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for asking questions, and thank you, Pierre, for speaking.